All right. I think we are live.
We are live.
And we do have a couple of folks on already, which is great. So I think one, just to kick us off, I'm really excited. I know Mark is really excited too. Um, and also petrified. It's been purely real.
Yep.
So we've had a calling for some time. We've been trying to work through how to manifest that calling. And I think, we finally kind of figured it out and we're taking that leap of faith
Yep.
right now. So excited to kick this off. We are called Two Brothers Talking. Obviously, why came up really in a conversation me and Mark were having about what do we want to call this, and he's like, "Well, we're just two brothers talking." Well, you're right.
Yep.
We are two. That's exactly right. So I guess to jump in real fast, a quick intro about like why we're doing this. The the calling that we had really was in response to things that we saw in the world, things that we were experiencing personally. And we've known each other for a long time, but I'd say we've gotten a lot closer in the last, 5, 8 years. And some of those experiences were just so challenging. And we thought, well, we can't be the only ones having these challenges.
Right.
There's enough, information out there that you guys all could probably YouTube. We've seen all over the place that just speaks to the mental health of men, some of the challenges men have, and we want to make sure that we're helping to change the world one man at a time by offering, a safe place to have a conversation about real topics, like real topics. And we do want this to be appropriate for young men too. So teenagers becoming men, that's where we can make an impact as well. So we'll keep it appropriate accordingly. But I guess just so you know who you're talking to, and why we're even credible enough to even have a conversation. Well, one, we're men.
Correct.
It's just to be real clear, we're not.
We are men.
We're straight men. And the other side of that equation too is we both have similar backgrounds as it relates to being married and having kids and such, and we'll go through that in a second. But I think overall, my name is Ewart Anderson. My family and most of my friends growing up called me Burrell. They know me by Burrell, so I go by that typically.
You know what's funny? I'm just gonna interrupt you.
Yep.
I never knew how to pronounce your first name, so I would see it in emails and stuff. I'm so used to calling you Burrell. That was the first time I actually heard you say your name, their first name. That's crazy.
You failed.
Yep. Yep.
For not knowing that.
Yep.
So most call me Burrell. Probably outside of work maybe. But a little bit about me, real quick. I'm a father of three. I've been married for going on 14 years, and we've been together for 16 or so. So all of our kids are now out of high school, and two of them are grown. The third one would like to think he is. I work in software, so I'm in corporate America, and I've been doing software for a long time. I am not a coder. I work in like leadership and operations. I wish I knew how to code, but I am a man of God, and I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, and I still live in the Dallas Metroplex. So, Mark, you want to share a little bit about you?
Yep. So similar background. Been in Dallas my whole life. Been married for about 9 years. Happily married 9 years. Father of four. Blended family. Right now, currently working in the telecommunications field. I'm a technician. Been doing that for roughly 20 years, off and on. I'm a minister. Love God. Love my family. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it. And I think the other piece to kind of mention too is you've been you've had a following for some time on social media, sharing what I would call like short videos that are powerful with a word of encouragement, or a scripture and a reference and an explanation. If you haven't seen Mark doing that, you should subscribe to that respective channel. We'll post those details rather in the chat. But I applaud you for that, and that's
appreciate it.
I've always admired that you do. So
appreciate it.
Eventually, I'll get to a point where I do that and join you. But I guess why don't we jump in? So I think that's enough about us. We frankly are not doing this for us. Just to be real explicit, like we're doing this for a response to a calling from God, and we're doing it for every man who has the opportunity to watch, or every man who has an opportunity to to check in live and chat with us. This is our first one, so there will be bloopers. We're gonna screw this up. There's all kinds of things that'll happen. work with us. We'll continue to iterate. We probably spent an unplanned 35 minutes before this
Prep
just
work.
figuring
Yep.
out what the heck we were doing. So I think first off, the topic is men and work-life balance. This is not a corporate topic. This is a real topic,
Yep.
a human experience topic. So we're going to talk about it from that lens, and we hope that this blesses somebody for sure. So I guess maybe to kick us off, a couple of things to think about. Like why is this a topic? Why did Mark and I decide to start with this topic? We have a list that we've gotten feedback from others on. We've gotten feedback from each other on. It's probably 100 items strong almost, and there's plenty that men are experiencing. But this is a real thing. Like men that are in the workplace, which most men, we kind of have three roles. If you try to boil it down to simple, it's to protect, it's to provide, and it's to love.
Right.
Right. So the provide part is real, and we know that there are men out there working hard, and when you work hard and then you come home, you bring some of that with you, to your house, whether you're a single man or you're married or you have kids. Either way, that stuff sticks with you, and there's a mental health element of that that's like showing up in lots of ways in the world. It shows up in anger, frustration. Shows up. You want to get like real. Shows up in suicide rates. It shows up in crime. It
Yep.
shows up in desperacy. It shows up in engagement
Right.
with their families, tension in the house, anxiety, frustration. So it shows up in lots of ways that are like tangible.
And it's funny. Everything you described, it's like in an unseen place,
Mhm.
and then eventually it kind of manifests itself in a way that people see. Don't necessarily understand why they're seeing what they're seeing, but as men, a lot of times this is what's happening inside of us, and you carrying this, in the morning when you wake up and say, "Hey, I love you, babe," or when you're driving down the highway, like you're feeling all this pressure internally to be a man and everything that goes along with that. But you're trying to interact with the world with all this inner pressure, and it's a challenge. If people are just really real, it's a challenge.
What do you think when you reflect on what you see, what you've seen as as a like a professional in corporate America, but then also as a minister, like when you've counseled, where do you feel like this tangible? What are some examples of where this tangibly shows up in a marriage?
Yeah. So I'll just speak personally. Like if I'm going through something internally, then it will affect. Like I may go silent. I'm in my head. I'm doing a lot of thinking as opposed to communicating. I just come off differently, and a lot of times what'll happen is your wife or your spouse or whoever will be like, "Hey, you good? Like everything okay?" And no, it's not. But even as a man who's a provider, a protector, you want to protect your family from the pressure that you feel. So a lot of times we'll just kind of go with, no, I'm good. Like it's okay. I'm fine. Not realizing, well, no, you're really not fine. And you probably need to communicate that to your spouse so that either they can help you walk through that, they can have a better understanding of, hey, he's going through something right now. They can be praying for you. But it's just as a man, just like I'm in protection mode. So let me keep this to myself. Let me work through it. It's gonna be okay. Like I'm good. I'm strong, right? Because I'm a man. I'm supposed to be strong. So it's like, nah, it's good, But it doesn't end up helping a strong family stay strong as you isolate yourself.
Right. And I guess what you just said, you kind of it sounds like you're describing suffering in silence
Mhm.
is a term I hear that probably has become a little dramatized and overused. But if you really look at that suffering in silence, how much of that has to do with pride, right? So like growing up, I know my dad. He's like in his mid 80s.
Wow.
So and grew up in East Texas, and like it's old school, Southern Baptist type growing up, and a lot of that has to do with what you just described of being strong,
Right.
and strength is somehow like stones don't speak. If you're gonna be the rock of the house, you don't speak. You're
Right.
silent. But that's not practical,
Right.
right? And I think that's been passed down generation after generation, maybe even not explicitly, but just by watching your dad or watching men around you. What do you think about that silence and the way that that's been cascaded down, from like prior generation to now, and maybe even how that's showing up with the current, like our kids, who are teenagers and smaller.
I think it's valid to a point, right? I think as a man, you should be able to carry the weight of your family to an extent. I think men today aren't built the same, and I also believe like as Christians, sometimes we can even go kind of super spiritual and like I'm gonna pray through it, not realizing there is a practical piece
Mhm.
that God gave you your spouse, God gave you family, God gave you brotherhood, God gives you accountability. All these things are there for a reason because you don't just pray your way through everything.
Right.
I mean, think about it this way: you got Adam in the garden; it's just him and God. You don't need anybody else. Like you're self sufficient, and it's you and God.
Hmm.
Why would the world would? Why does he give Eve? Why does he introduce Eve into the equation and say, "Now you be fruitful and multiply"? Like, just go do this by yourself, Adam. Like, why doesn't God create it where he's self-sufficient? I heard a minister say it this way. He's like, it is not good to be alone or all one.
Mhm.
I love how he put that because it's like for whatever reason, God has designed his creation where you need other people. And I think as men, like it's good to be strong, but it's also good to embrace that God has designed this so that you have only so much, and then you have to go somewhere else to complement what you have in order to do what God has called you to do. So I think there is some validity to the fact that I do need to be strong. There may be times where I need to be that rock, but then there are also times where that rock's going to need help, and that's where we have all these people around us to help us with that.
I think something. I'm curious to go back to something you just said a minute ago. Um, when you made mention of like being alone, or why can't you do it by yourself? If that's what was intended, then I guess, like, how does that show up with all the isolation we see? Like I don't feel like typically most men have a really good friend circle,
Right.
and good doesn't mean y'all are around each other. It doesn't just mean that.
Uh-huh.
It means more than that. It doesn't necessarily, like, I don't feel like a lot of men, a lot of us have, the types of outlets, to where we don't isolate, because it's really easy to isolate, and that seems to be one of the most dangerous things.
Yep.
That leads to a terrible balance, because the one thing you can't isolate yourself from is work. So you got to go to work,
Got to go to work.
and let's be honest, like you're gonna put on the face, you're gonna front, you're gonna do whatever you got to do for the people at work,
Right.
so that you can provide.
Right.
So then when you come out of that, what's the other form? What's the other side of that you need, or that we're missing? Let's, before we get into solve mode, what's the other side of that we're missing in the problem that would help compensate, what you're having to do at work?
So I think as men, we have to be honest and admit to ourselves we do need other people. And I'm talking about real relationships. I think social media, I think the way the culture is wired today, we think we have people around us. Like let's say you got a large following on social media and you communicate what you're going through in life, and you think that's like real support. You think that's real community. It's not real. When I talk about having people beside you, I'm talking about like a brotherhood, like that friend who you can be transparent with. If you can't be transparent, then you're still alone, right? If you can't be honest with someone, if you can't be authentic, then you're still alone. You're still by yourself, and that's just not how God has designed it. I mean, if you think about every aspect of what God has designed, it's contingent on these other pieces. If you look at nature, if you look at the human body, like there's this head, there's this central piece, and all these other pieces work together. And as men, at the point we accept that and move forward and respond to that, I think we're going to be in a better place, and our families are going to be in a better place, and we're going to be better at work. Like whatever environment God puts us in, we're like, you're a leader at your job. How important is it for you to utilize the other resources that are around you? Like, I'm sure it's very important. You're not doing your job by yourself, even though you're a leader at your job. And so I think as men, we have to accept that and embrace it.
Do you feel? I guess when you take right? So you've got, so we have kids, right?
Right.
In our individual households, and I guess one of the things that show up with in a work life balance scenario with men is we don't we want to be our kids either favorite friend. We want to make life easy for them. We want to let them have things we didn't have,
Right.
and I think that leads to the opposite of what you just said. Like we don't. They're also resources in our home too.
Yep.
They get of a certain age, and that age is not very old.
Right.
It wasn't very old for me.
Right.
And I think about like we're probably not doing them any favors. So the problem doesn't just sit with men; it sits with the lessons we're teaching our kids
Right.
by not by isolating, and then therefore they're not hearing what they should be doing or what they could be doing.
Right.
They don't get the experiences that build confidence.
Yep.
By delivering what dad or mom is suggesting that they do. Like, how is that another way that work life imbalance and that isolation and that frustration kind of shows up? Like the kids pay the brunt.
Yeah, I think they definitely pay the price of the bills that I create. They end up paying for it. Not only do they not have, not only do I might isolate myself a little bit when I'm under pressure, but then them seeing that example, it kind of communicates something to them. This is how a man should be. This is what dads do, or, so on and so forth. So I think it impacts me. It impacts what they're seeing, that example that I'm providing. And then also you kind of touched on, it's like, I can also learn things from my children, especially as they get older, those teenage years. Like they see things, they notice things, and my relationship with my children, they communicate things that help me be a better father. So it's like you're constantly pulling from all these different resources that God has around you, to the degree that you choose not to be all one or alone. It's just, are we as men going to accept that? Are we going to like accept these resources that God has brought into our lives? I mean, it's so easy to kind of just pray about it, but not recognize when God is providing the answer to your prayer. And he does that in a lot of different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, so like faith without works is dead, right?
Right.
And that scripture has a lot of interpretations, but none of them involve sitting back and doing nothing.
Right.
Right. Like typically, even if like your faith shows up in a continual prayer life, that is doing something.
Right. Yep.
It's action. That is action. Like the opposite of what we need to do. What I just heard behind what you said is like inaction is the worst thing you can do. Right. And the first action, kind of taking a big old step back, is having the self-awareness enough to know that you are imbalanced.
Yep.
Right. I think those of us that work in a certain way, we seek out this almost like a reward, a level of completion. We need to know that we have satisfied someone or satisfied a task.
Right.
And work, frankly, is one of the easiest places to do that.
Right.
You go to work, you have a very defined set of tasks or result that you're supposed to create. You go create it. Somebody may or may not say good job, and ideally if you work at a decent employer, they do. So then, that's like your pat on the back.
Yep.
There is not a pat on the back at home, typically, in most homes. So then I think men are less inclined to put in that same amount of work. They'll show up at work better. I say we will show up at work better.
Right.
And than we do at home sometimes.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So you're speaking to, we kind of lean into the providing piece. Mm-hmm. So how do we as men like kind of balance that, where we, because you mentioned giving love, providing, and protection. So why is it do you think we lean into the providing piece, and how do we balance that?
I think
because I know you work, you work a lot. Yeah. So how do you balance that?
So man, that's a recent learning. So when I say this, take it with a grain of salt that I have not been doing this for a long time.
Gotcha.
Like less than 5 years.
Gotcha.
So, because I think it's a habit when it's been a long time, right? So it's just become a habit for me. The answer to your question on like what do I do now to find that balance is, from everybody's brain's different. My brain is a bit more numeric. Like I measure things by numbers.
Gotcha.
I think everything else is just fluffy. You know what I mean? So it's like I can say what I'm spending my time doing. My calendar tells me what I'm spending my time doing.
Right.
My day tells me what I'm spending my time doing. So every day, my day is broken up into really 3 buckets.
Okay.
I work almost every single day. And, like weekends, there is, if it ends in Y, I probably work on it.
Okay.
So I work every single day. I do that because I feel compelled to provide. I also feel compelled to, because I'm responsible. To your point, in the leadership role, I feel compelled because I'm responsible for other people,
right,
and their well-being too. And that might not be the way that everyone thinks about it, but I do take it very personal.
Right.
I feel it's a privilege to be in a leadership position. So working a lot doesn't bother me one bit. But I did spend a lot of time not giving certain types of a love and loving connections and loving instances and moments to my kids.
Yeah.
And to my wife. And look, I could sit back and say, well, I was working 2 jobs for most of that time.
Right.
Like, but would that justify, hypothetically, would that justify me if one day during that period of time I lost my wife for whatever reason? I would regret terribly.
Yep.
Not giving up one of those jobs to spend the time with her.
Yep.
So those 3, that provide, protect, and love, the provide and love are equal. Like they're not, it seems like you spend more time providing because that's the way the world is built, and it does require more time to earn, because today you earn with time. You don't earn with results.
Right.
You earn with time.
Right.
Right. So people get paid hourly for a reason. You earn the time. At the same time, like, love is not time. Love is experiences.
Okay.
And if you're not present, you can't give those.
Okay. So
I spend time being present.
So you connect love to being present, a good portion of it. So would you say that we lean into providing for our family? Does that allow us to continue to be alone? And because if I'm loving my spouse and my family, I got to be present to some degree.
Yeah.
But if I go to work, I get to be alone. I get to do my own thing. I'm in my own space. I don't have to worry about what you think or your opinion or like. So does that you think that kind of plays into it?
Yeah. So you're saying like sometimes work is a refuge.
Yeah, because like, why do we as men lean into providing over anything? Like, hey, I provide. I work 2 jobs. I do all this stuff. Like, why do we lean into that?
So I'll say something that I bet is probably controversial.
Okay.
But I didn't believe it until now.
Okay.
It's because it's easier. Everyone avoids the hard thing.
Yep.
I avoided, spending time with my wife because I knew that meant we had to talk about things that made me uncomfortable, and I couldn't be a real man, a godly man, if I wasn't willing to, if I'm in front of her and I'm unwilling to have those conversations. So I got a cheat code. I'll just not be in front of her. And I think that's really common.
Yep.
I think we do what's easiest, and we don't want to, and we kind of like idolize work.
Yep.
And work is not your identity. But we make it our identity because then that is a great alternative to making being a loving husband your identity, to making being a loving father, an engaged father your identity. And those, like, that is a hard truth. And man, I had to face that in the mirror one day.
Yeah.
And it just it took a long time to get past the guilt that came with that.
Yeah.
The frustration and the I don't know what to do.
Yep.
Part of that. And then it just like it did exactly what God, I think, wants to happen often. It broke me down to doing nothing but being able to ask him, what am I supposed to be doing here?
Yeah. And that's hard, because as men, we do identify with what we do. Like if I'm in a room full of other men, first thing when I introduce myself, I want to tell them what I do. And if I'm measuring myself, if you tell me you do X, Y, Z, then I'm calculating, okay, so you make this amount of money. And then what do I do? And how do I communicate what I do? So now I got to elevate. So I do these things, I don't just do this. I do this and this and this. And it's like, we do identify with like our jobs or our work. If I told you I'm just a stay-at-home father, take care of my kids, provide, it doesn't hit the same. It sounds almost sounds like unmanly to say that. And so how do we get past that? How did you get past it? You know?
I think one. So it's two answers to that question.
Okay.
First answer is real simple, which is me and my wife made a conscious decision about. It's probably been like 11 years.
Okay.
12 years ago, where like when we got together, we were both working. I had 2 jobs, she had 1, and we got 3 kids. So it's like you kind of need those jobs, and things don't get no cheaper. So then we did that for a while, but we recognized that something was missing with the kids, and we knew that there were financial elements to that there were benefits to having her at home, focused on the kids. For instance, your kids typically do better when a parent is at home if they're engaged with them in school, and that'll lead to potentially some type of collegiate opportunities or scholarships that the kid wouldn't have had a chance to get otherwise. We saw some of that,
right?
So and even the slightest benefit there helped. So like with that, I had to recognize it, because I went into that process almost a bit resentful. Like, okay, I do agree we should have you at home, but man, you have no idea what it's like to have to work this much.
Okay.
Then I realized how much she was working.
Right.
And I almost like I had a little envy for a while. Like, man, you're working a lot and you're doing just as much as I'm doing, but for a long time it's like she's having more fun doing it.
Right.
And it kind of bothered me. So I thought, well, hang on. Just because I have a job doesn't mean I couldn't have that same fun with her and with them. I could be at every soccer game. I could be at concerts. I can go do like whatever the kids are doing. I could be in that. I could sit and talk to them and help them, right? So why couldn't I do that and work? So then, and frankly, like this the other side of the equation is I think we're built to do more. I think we're built to do. I'll just use me and my wife. Any women listening to this, don't get upset. But for me and my wife, I am built to do more than her if I'm willing. And it's not because she can't do stuff. She is highly capable, and she shows me that frequently.
Right.
But I'm a husband and a man, and I'm obligated to do more. So when I recognize that, then I was able to say, okay, 1, I see what you're capable of, and I see how hard it is to be at home and to do the things that maybe I took for granted because I was at work.
Okay.
And then 2, I realized, but I should be doing those things too, and I should be providing.
So let me ask you this: you said as a man, we're obligated to do more. Okay, so how do you define more? Because because I'm thinking as a man, if I see what I do as more, then I attach more value to it. It's more important.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I'm wondering, like, I'm just hashing this out as we're talking. Is that a part of the problem? That maybe what we all bring to the table is important, and we could flip flop roles if you wanted to. Like, I could stay at home with the kids, and like my wife works, but in general, like as men, whatever these roles traditional roles that we have, you can flip flop them for whatever reason. The roles are the way that they are. But are they more important, or like how we quantify them? Could that be part of the problem?
I think it can. I think the way we typically think about it is, which is traditional, like you just described. The way that I choose to think about it though is different than that. Like I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Okay.
And some of it was because I had for a big part of my childhood, I had a single mother.
Right.
So it's like I saw a woman do things. I learned what a woman was capable of. I'll put it that way.
Right.
And so men, women, traditional roles. I didn't see that. I didn't grow up with that.
Gotcha.
So then the way I see it now is there is a set of needs in a home.
Okay.
Whether you're single, you're married, you're rooming with someone that's a friend, you have kids, doesn't even matter what the situation is. It could be in a college dorm. Like, it literally doesn't matter.
Right.
There's a set of needs that need to be covered.
Right.
Whoever is capable, you start there. So I have a list of those needs. Whoever's capable of tackling those needs, I know how to keep a yard. Cool. That's your deal. I'm actually really tidy. Cool. That's your deal at the house. Like, you keep the kitchen. I'm good with numbers. Cool. Can you help do the budget?
Right.
Like, whatever it is, the budget's a strong word. It might be just a list of list of bills, like whatever it is. That's your jam. You start there, and it doesn't matter who can do it. Like I have plenty of friends that their wives do the budget, and the wife doesn't work.
Right.
But she's really good with numbers and great with planning.
Right.
And she's better than that man, because that man might go blow that money on who knows what.
Right.
And he knows that.
Right.
So he's giving that up. I think going through that list and assigning those things to who can add value is the most important part of that. So the roles are non-traditional. The roles that exist in a home should just be the role of having an impact and doing the most that you can.
Right.
It's not the role of specific tasks.
And I would even add to that, you can be the leader without having to be the one controlling everything. A good leader, they're gonna draw from the input of everybody else at the table. If you're a good leader. Now, if you're a bad leader, it's like a dictator. What I say goes. I don't even get the benefit from what you bring to the table. But like it's as our world shifts, that conversation there's a lot of pressure in that conversation, and even the language that you use can be like triggering for some of the people. But it's like at the end of the day, I like how you put it. Like there's this the house has these needs. Who brings the most value to these different needs that the household has? I like how you said that. Keep going.
I guess getting to that point though is difficult.
Yeah.
Like being able to sit down and have that conversation with a friend or a spouse or your kids or whoever is adult enough to have an impact, or let's say old enough, because you don't need to be an adult to have an impact.
Right.
But whoever's going to have an impact, getting that conversation and that value set embedded in the house is really difficult.
Yeah.
There is something that the kids grew up with, with me, that I grew up with, which is like always make everywhere you're at better when you're there.
Okay.
Than it was before. If you don't do that, you have failed. That might be strong, but that is my view.
Right.
And I feel accountable to that. I try to impart that value to them to feel accountable to that as well.
Right.
Wherever you are, like pay a bill, help out, be proactively make it better.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if you're able to do that, you can, like, those set of tasks and who gets assigned is a no-brainer. But if you are surrounded, but look, let's be honest, everybody ain't built like that. Everybody doesn't want to make everything better. Everybody doesn't want to do that work. Some people prefer those naps. They like that time on the phone. They like the time doing nothing. They would prefer that.
Right.
And in moderation and in balance, you can have that. But someone in that house with someone who like maybe prefers those things more, prefers that chill time more.
Right. Someone
else is covering the load. So it's the work-life balance is it's actually more about the home than it is about work.
So in 2025, our jobs tend to ask more and more of us. Like, you're off the clock, but yet I'm asking you, can you do this? I need you to be worried about this. Hey, you're on call, all these different aspects of how our job demands so much from us. As a man, what is our responsibility in light of, hey, if I'm gonna keep this job that's going to give me X amount of income and it's asking all these things of me, what responsibility do I have as a man to still be present at soccer games, football games, basketball games, but yet I work a lot? Is there a point where as a man, I have to recognize, oh, my household has other needs and I'm also required to kind of provide in those other ways also?
So, like, to me, that's where like every situation is different.
Okay.
I think I don't know like, because I can't read anybody else's mind. I don't really know I can't distinguish when someone's unwilling to put in the effort, but they could do all of it.
Okay.
Or they don't know how, or they're not capable of doing that. And none of those three options are wrong.
Right.
We are who we are, and we're capable of what we're capable of. One thing like that personally that I tried to do was do it all. And that had a toll for sure. But that was a choice I made.
Right.
So there was a time not that long ago where I was working a full-time job that was 55 hours a week easy. I had a part-time job that was 15 to 20 hours a week,
Mm.
helping some, other businesses. And a little bit of that was passion because I wanted to help people.
Right.
A little bit of that was financial to provide. And then I was at soccer games. And if that meant that's, I had to get 5 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep that day, that's just what it meant. Because I was unwilling to let the kid, to the degree that I could, I was unwilling to let the kids feel that their events weren't important. I will say that had a cost, and it made me frustrated. It made me very angry. Like I was angry all the time. I was snappy. I snap at the kids.
Yeah.
Because I always felt like it was unappreciated.
Right.
Right. Like that effort that they didn't see to make all that happen.
Right.
Was unappreciated. So since then, let's call it the last even 3-4 years, I've backed off of that and gotten some more balance and introduced two things into my boundary system that like helped.
Right.
One of them was proactively telling them I'm not going to be at everything. You like we've agreed that we want a certain lifestyle and that we want certain things in life for you to go to college and for all those things to happen. I need to work, and here's what that means. And they struggled to understand that for a period of time, but we got past it and they understood it because we were able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And particularly my boys, I was really proud that we were able to eventually talk about those things and they were so young. I mentioned too, the other thing was I started to do some self-care so that I could keep going at a fast pace, get a lot done and not be angry.
Okay. So let me push back a little bit on that. So if working a job that's going to provide a certain amount of income, that's going to give you a certain level of life, and then you have family, events, recreational activity, so on and so forth. And then if it brings you to the point where, hey, now I need to go talk to someone because I'm frustrated and angry. To what degree has culture do we as men in those moments have to adjust our value system of like, well, what's really important? Like, is there some point where we have to say, you know what, I don't have to have 2 cars and a nice house. Like maybe what might be more important is, I need to cut back on my work. Maybe I need to get a different job. Like how do we deal with, because culture is like there 24/7.
You gotta have it.
Yes. And it's even like, I was somewhere and I was with a friend and I was thinking, I almost felt, I felt a little bad because I wanted this person to have so much more. And I'm like, why does that, they're happy. Like, why do I feel bad that they don't have what I have? Like it almost was an indictment on like how I look at life. And it was kind of like, might be something wrong there that you are bothered that this person is healthy, they're happy, they're doing the best they can, and they don't have as much as you think we should have. And it's like, I guess my question is like, how do we as men kind of balance this when you're talking about work life, the fact that we have this value system that kind of governs how we see work life in general, and these needs that we have, a lot of them aren't really needs.
Right. And
so how do we allow it? Almost now you're kind of pulling, what does God really want for us as men? And like balancing the his expectations for our life. Like how do we do that? Like how do we navigate all this?
Well, there's probably not a right answer for that question.
Okay.
I'll give you my answer.
Okay. So give me your answer. So I understand when you said like there's probably not a right answer.
A right answer for every man. But maybe my answer will give some light to what I mean by that.
Gotcha.
So I don't feel that you can. I don't feel that one man can assess that of another man without having a conversation. Like if I have balance and provide, love, and protect, and I have found that need balance,
okay,
I can't assume that of you and project my needs on you.
Okay.
I have to ask. I have to assess. Like, hey, you seem like you've been kind of down here lately. What's going on?
Right.
Like, and then you could tell me, oh, I'm frustrated because I had to pick up this extra job. Well, did you have to pick up the extra job? Like, we can have that conversation, and your need in that scenario might not be my need.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, I know this isn't the case, but this is the case for somebody. You got a child with health needs, you're gonna work that extra job. You can't sacrifice not providing the health care that child needs if that child has a health need that's not standard.
Yeah.
Right. Like, or getting the care for a child with autism, and like you're gonna do what you got to do. And I personally don't believe that's wrong to provide that, right? But you have to have that conversation and assess it, because I might be working just as hard so I can get that Bentley. It's like that's not the same thing.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I think there's a conversation to be had. But one way to look at it is to think about the balance between those three: the provide, protect, and love. If you're gonna provide really, really hard, you can sometimes, one way to gauge if you're providing too much, because you're providing a whole lot of wants instead of just needs.
Yeah.
Is are you giving yourself the time and the capacity to show love in non-financial ways?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're not, then you probably are overdoing the needs and it's more like wants.
Yeah.
But if you are, then you're probably striking some type of balance.
Yeah. And
I think there's no scenario like we were, Adam was created first for a reason. And if God is love and Adam was created first, and we're created in God's image, like we are supposed to be great at love.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be great at love.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then you can't be great at love and like overdo the providing for an extended period of time.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier about sometimes we avoid the hard thing, mm-hmm. and we're providing wants and ignoring needs. Mm-hmm. Like for what I think it's like it is an ever shifting environment of like what I need. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I may need a specific thing, and then other times I don't need that specific thing. So this environment that we're in, like family, is like it's ever shifting. One of my daughters, they needed something different from me as a father. And I was like, oh man, I mean, I had been always providing this X, and now you're saying you need Y. It's like, okay, so as a father, I've got to shift. Okay, they need this now. Because the environment has shifted. They've grown. They need something differently or something different. And so, yeah, I think it's like we tend to kind of we avoid the hard thing and do what's convenient and what we've mastered doing. I'm a man. I can go to work. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to use my physical ability or my mental ability to do certain things. Okay, but now it's like my wife needs a hug. Mm-hmm. She needs a kiss on the cheek every morning. She needs me.
My boss just yelled at me at work for nothing, and I'm pissed off.
Yep. And now you got to balance that. You got to grow. Right. I thought of this the other day. It's kind of like I forget what you call these guys when you got this log of wood in the water and it's spinning and they're standing on top of it and they're kind of running on it. And I saw this,
Crazy.
Yep. That's a good way to describe it. I'm trying to who came up with this idea. No idea. But there was another guy on it, and it was a competition to kind of try to make somebody fall.
Okay.
And so I feel like in life, we're like men on this log and we're trying to keep our balance as this thing keeps spinning. And then all of a sudden now you got the enemy who comes in. Now he's trying to throw us off, So it's not just like I'm trying to provide needs. Now it's like I'm trying to provide needs, and then I got an enemy who's trying to throw me off constantly. And that's where you bring the spiritual piece in. So like as a man of God, how do you balance? How does the spiritual piece help as we try to do this work-life balance?
So prayer, my prayer life is not like 4 prayers today. My prayer life is like a ongoing, never-ending conversation with God all day.
Yep.
So I think prayer and a relationship with God is paramount. I guess the second piece is the self-awareness to realize you can't do it by yourself and you need help. So one of the things that I actually followed my wife's suit, she influenced me on this big time, and I was really proud that she did, is like objective therapeutic approach. So like whether that's a counselor or that could be a loved one that you really trust. But for me, it was a therapist that I was like, you know what, I want to try to talk about some things with someone who has zero judgment for me and doesn't know me from Adam.
And they have no They have no benefit in how this thing goes, right?
No,
Okay.
no benefit. Like,
Right.
so there's no point in them lying to me. They're just gonna shoot me straight.
Gotcha.
And that helped me recognize, like, honestly, when you do something like that, which by the way, most jobs have some employee assistance program, EAPs, you can probably do this for free.
Right.
Just to put that out there.
Yep.
Like literally for free.
Yep.
And when you go do something like that, instead of you being so focused on what everybody else isn't doing, or how bad your situation is, it takes this spotlight and reflects it into the most powerful thing you have, you. Like it, and that helped me a ton. It helped me realize that I wasn't setting boundaries. It helped me realize for myself. It helped me realize that I was asking too much of myself. It was unreasonable.
Right.
It helped me realize that it's okay to need balance and to need a refuge and a reprieve and not feel guilty.
Right.
It's okay to tell people you love that you can't. I love you, but I can't.
Okay, so
what else do you need? I can't deliver that thing. I can't be there and there and there and there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like all unless I'm gonna clone myself. Like I just can't.
Right. Right.
So I think like it allowed me to have those conversations in a way that wasn't like, man, I just can't. I'm done. Like come on. More like, hey, I understand you need me there.
Right.
But here's what I'm doing instead. It still aligns with you. I'm still caring about you because I'm at work.
Right.
At the same time, I will make the next one.
Yep.
Okay. Like fair.
Right.
And look, they might not understand it in the moment. But later on, I found that those conversations go way better than I ever thought they did. But everything hard seems scary.
Right.
So I had not had those conversations before.
I think you mentioned the objective therapeutic approach. And I think, when you're talking about relationships with family, spouse, kids, it's not objective. Either way, going either way. So I think that objective therapeutic approach is super important, which the word of God can be that if you approach it honestly. If you approach it like from a kind of defensive, I'm right type, then you can find whatever you want to in scripture to support what you want to do.
Right.
But if the word of God can definitely be that for us as men, and even that accountability person or the therapist or whoever, like we have these resources if we choose to use them. And I love how you said, like, even at your job, you can go to a counselor and most jobs will provide this stuff for free, through EAP, and they'll help with that. Okay. So look, having said all that we've said, like, what would be your closing thought on, like, hey, as a man, like you're talking to some brothers out here who probably watching this, like, what would the best advice be for kind of balancing life and work in the home life?
I think my advice would be, number one, like obviously you have to start with reflecting on where you're spending your time. Like honestly, it starts with an assessment. Everything worth doing starts with an honest assessment.
Yep.
Where are you spending your time?
Yep.
Right. And if that means that you are not spending an adequate amount of time, and I'll tell you how you know this in a second. If you're not spending an adequate amount of time displaying your love directly to your family, they don't see your display at work. You do work out of love. I'm not discounting that, but they don't see that.
Right.
They just see the outcome. Right. They see the outcome. If you take the time to get that assessment, then you can reflect on that assessment and make adjustments accordingly. And I would suggest that when you get that assessment, or maybe even before you get it, like engage someone who can help you through that assessment that doesn't have any skin in your game. So somebody basically not in your house.
Yeah.
My father-in-law is a great example. You would think he'd be biased. He's the most objective person I know.
Yeah.
And he's just really good at being able to give advice like that. So like find somebody like that you can trust. If you don't feel that you have that person, check out an EAP program if you have a job that has something like that. And there's lots of other options, out there too that are free or super low cost.
Yep.
I would start there. Like I think there's 1,000 solutions.
Yep.
But I think it starts at that assessment. The way that you find out in that assessment if you are showing love in the way and meeting the needs of your house in the way that they really need it is asking.
That's
crazy,
tough.
Crazy concept.
But that's tough because if you already in a relationship, it's already everybody they're out for their own good.
Sure.
to ask your spouse, "Am I doing a good job?" That could be a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people because they don't want to hear that answer.
And it could be. It will.
It will be. Yep.
Because no one's gonna tell you 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
So and if they do, they lying.
Yeah.
So like, so you should challenge them, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's all right. Because this is where pride is one of the worst things for men, and this is where pride gets in our way, and we have to like let it go. You are not going to get a 10 because you're not doing a 10, and that's all right.
Yep.
That's how the best people in the world at their craft, whether you're an athlete or you're an executive or whatever you do, an artist, they practice and they reflect on the gaps every day. There is no pride.
Yeah. Yeah.
No ego. It's just like I'm going to attack myself at being better.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be happy about it. Like that's what we need to do.
Yep. I was thinking about this the other day. Like we need to do the hard thing, and we also need to say the hard thing. We specialize in saying the hard thing to other people.
Right.
We need to say the hard thing to ourselves. I thought about the reason I thought about this. I was going through the word and I was looking at when Jesus told Judas, we told the disciples somebody's going to betray me, and Judas basically asked, like, "Is it me?" He's like, "Yeah, it's you."
Right.
He told him straight to his face, "You're going to betray me." He told Peter, right? He told Peter, like, "You're going to betray me 3 times. You're going to deny me 3 times tonight." And like they didn't hear. I don't know what it didn't process correctly. And so like we're great at telling other people the hard thing. We need to tell ourselves the hard thing and listen. And part of that might be talking to your spouse because they will tell you the truth.
Right.
They will tell you the truth. That's hard. That's hard.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Any closing thoughts on your side on the like how would you what would be your suggestion on next steps outside of what I just shared?
No, I love what you said. You got to be honest with yourself. You got to do a self-assessment of like, where am I? And even acknowledging, you said towards the end, you said, "Hey, I'm not a 10. I know I think I'm a 10, but I'm a 6 or 7. And now we need to figure out what is this other 3 that I'm missing." So I love that. Like you do need that objective opinion to help you process like your flaws and where you fall short. And we all fall short. Like I know we don't think we do, but we do. And so I think you got scripture, you got men and women of God that are in your life. You got a therapist, like you got all these different resources where we need to lean on these things because as men, and this will be my final thought is as men, the world fell when I fell. Mm-hmm. And that continues to be the case to this day. As men fall, like I don't care about this modern view of family. In general, when the man has fallen, society has fallen. Mm-hmm. And so we need to embrace that responsibility and make adjustments. So yep.
That's right. Well, it ties right into, just kind of wrapping us up, ties right into what we started with, which is we want to make the world better one man at a time.
Yep.
And it is it's a reason why we're focused on men.
Yep.
It doesn't mean this is only for men, but there is a focus on arming men with tools to battle what they have to battle every day.
Amen.
So amen. All right. Well, we thank everybody for tuning in or anyone who's going to watch. And more to come on our cadences on how often we'll do this. We'll probably do it, every 2 weeks at least. We may speckle a couple of extra episodes in there too. All right. We love y'all. Holla.